Okay, great. Who would like to go first?
Max and I can go first, CNET.
Great, okay.
All right, here, let me share my screen. We put together a couple of slides just to help visually. So let's see. So both Max and I are the NCSA, and we're part of the CNET data management effort. So let's, I don't think I need to go full screen, but primarily, maybe I will. Yeah. What we've been working on is, we mentioned this before, but we have a bunch of services that we maintain for the project. These were services that we started with IML-CZO, and the cluster that we're running on is being retired, and there's a new cluster that we're running on. And on this one, we're changing how we're doing things. So both clusters were OpenStack clusters with a bunch of VMs running. In this new instance, we're actually running everything as containers in Kubernetes. And this is probably not very interesting to most of us here, but it's taking us quite a bit of time to this migration, because we were actually not running a lot of these services as containers in Kubernetes. And so there's a lot of like infrastructure that we had to build. And right now we've pretty much made the migration. The old cluster is going down next week. So one way or another, we're on the new one. And as a reminder, there's two major services that we maintain for CINet. One is the raw file service, where we put any kind of file in, which is kind of like a HydroShare kind of interface. And then we have this kind of visualization web app, geospatial web app, where you can look at all the sites for public data streams, and you can zoom in and take a look at these time series. So those are our two main things that we're moving on. And this was also an opportunity to update the actual software, because we haven't done this in a long time. So we're still in the process of cleaning up, the instances and the data and all of that. But this has definitely been taking a lot of our time. The other thing is we have a new instrument on our Flux Tower. It's actually a set of 3 instruments, I think. But that means that we have a new data stream, which is separate. What we do with the data coming from the Flux Tower is, we put the raw files in this raw file repository called Clouder. And then a subset of that we send to this dashboard to be visualized. And so we're setting this up. We have the raw files going into Clouder every hour, but we're still working on the parsers for it. We also are taking this opportunity to review the metadata definitions for all the parameters on these instruments, not just in the case of this instrument, but also in the larger Flux Tower and some of our other data feeds. So this is just a screenshot of some of the work that we're doing with the scientists to write down as much metadata as possible. And we're going to take this metadata and do a better job this time to embed it with the raw files, as well as the GeoStreaming stuff, so that when they're officially published, things like HydroShare and other places, we're ready to go. So we're doing a lot of work with getting all the parameters well defined. We also have another data set that is new that started last semester, that is cores, samples, and the scientist has already gotten the IGSN IDs, so we have those, and we have the data for the cores, which we're still getting familiar, Max and I, about what it looks like. Our background is computer science, software engineering, not as much the scientific aspect. So we have all these transacts with these images, and also we have some numeric data based on some analysis that they did on them. And so we're trying to figure out how to package this and what the best way to basically, put this all together, all this information all together in Clouder. And in Clouder, we can attach arbitrary metadata with the raw files. So our goal is to take this, put it in there, and then all the IDs like the IGSN IDs and this other metadata right there with the raw files, so that when they get published, it's all in one place. And I think that's it. We also have a few other data sources that we're cleaning up, but it's kind of rough.
Okay,
any questions?
Great. So I have a question.
Yeah.
And maybe you're thinking about this already, but you guys are putting all of your stuff into Clouder, which is awesome. And that's a great way, I think, for you guys to organize your data. Have you thought about how much and what and when you're going to transition from Clouder to, say, HydroShare or EarthCam, depending on the types of data, and when you would take that formal publication step for certain data sets?
Yeah, so the plan was the 2-year embargo. I think it's still the case. So all this data, the new data is private right now. So we're keeping in Clouder as private data while we, the scientists write, the papers and publish the papers, and we also organize it properly with all the information. So we have that kind of that lower bound. But that being said, our goal is to make it. We had developed some code that you could just go to a data set in Clouder, push a button, and everything would be moved to HydroShare using the APIs. So that's our goal right now. Is still to ideally still have that working, so that anybody in CINet, once they're ready to publish, they can just, ideally the scientists themselves push the button, and it would then, be published to HydroShare. That's what that we had done in the past, and it was just experimental. So I'm sure there will be a lot of, work that needs to go into making it robust so that an actual scientist can use it. But we still are aiming for that, for the raw files that we're kind of packaging in Clouder.
Cool. Okay. So just a couple of notes about that. So we are working on a service through the data submission portal. And I think I've already talked to you about this, Luigi, but for validating the metadata before you push to HydroShare. Yeah. So we want to make sure that whatever code you develop that's pushing things to HydroShare validates first, then pushes. Yeah. So we're working on that right now. And we'd be happy to work with you on, testing or whatever it takes to make sure that that push to HydroShare works correctly.
That sounds great. Yeah, we're more than happy to help you test it and play around with it right away. Yeah, whenever it's ready. Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else?
Max, anything else on your end?
Don't think so. I'll be the point person attending these meetings for the foreseeable future. I think you might have seen Diego here and there, but I'll be the point person for the next few months at least.
Okay, great. Thank you for the update. Who wants to go next?
I can go next, Young Lee.
Great.
Hi, Jeff. Yeah. Big data cluster. Yeah. Let me share the screen. Just a brief summary of what's going on in terms of data collection and upload to HydroShare. Oh, let me see. Oh, share screen. Oh, okay. First, let me share one screen and I'll switch over to something else. So this is, do you see all this diagram? So this is how the big data cluster team is organized, and then data science. And then you may want to take a look at that. There are 2 teams, Intermountain and West, Northeast. So these are the teams that are sort of at the forefront of actually collecting data, okay? Sensors deployed and then data are being collected. So I focused on these 2 teams, and then, sorry, I just did unshare, right? So, okay, oh, here. You share. So do you see this one, data collection Northeast SRW?
Yep, we're good.
Oh, okay. So Intermountain West team and Northwest team, these are the 2 teams at the forefront of the collecting data. So Intermountain West, both teams have already collected and are collecting time series data. So Intermountain West, so modality, they are soil moisture, temperature, relative humidity, and snow depth, ongoing. And then sensors were installed last year or earlier. So in fact, in Jeff, you may remember an email from Gabriel.
Mhm.
So Gabriel has already her time series data sets uploaded to HydroShare in the years like 2017 through 2019. So she has all updated and renewed data sets now. It has been collecting through this CZN project. So she is going to update the old file. So she was asking, do I need to overwrite it, or just keep it and add new ones? I think the advice that she and I received, what's her name? Oh, boy, sorry. Ad hoc. I don't see her name here.
Clara, are you thinking about Clara?
Clara, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Well, keep the old one, add new
Clara
ones.
will be here.
Huh? Are you there?
Clara is coming. She's not here yet.
She's not here yet, but she may join us.
Okay, whoever spoke is almost all echo. Sound like speaking from a twilight zone, but okay, she's not here. Okay, all right. So that's happening. Okay, and then another one, Northeast. No data have been uploaded to HydroShare yet. So the data being used are USGS data. It was collected, spearheaded by James Shanley at USGS. So the team has been using that time series data for some research study. And then the raw data, I'm not sure, but the corrected data upon approval by USGS, okay? So I haven't even talked to USGS whether we could upload the outputs as well as the inputs. So upon their approval, okay? This time series data collected from environmental sensors deployed at the Northeast Slippery Research River Watershed in Vermont, okay? Will be uploaded. In addition to that, Julia Pedrillo, who is the leading PI of this big data cluster, is in the process of doing some soil analysis and then leaching experiment using some data that's derived from the team's CAM database. Okay, yeah. So it is in the, she's with her postdoc, Julia is in the process of doing some study. So there will be, in addition to this Slippery Research Watershed time series data. So there are two kinds of data in progress. Okay, and then there's a plan. When the time is right, we're going to upload that to HydroShare. So these are the two frontal efforts, okay, toward uploading data to the HydroShare that's shared by all clusters. That's about it. 5 minutes. I did. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Byung. So one thing that has come up with our discussions with the big data cluster, they asked about sharing time series data and what formats they should be using. And I know that a lot of the clusters are doing time series data, and we have some recommendations about how to share time series data in HydroShare, but this is a topic that we may want to discuss at an upcoming data help session. For those of you that are collecting time series data, I think it would be good to have a discussion about the specific format that we're using to upload time series data to repositories and see whether we can coordinate, because I think that's a point where if we could adopt a standard way of doing that across to all of the thematic clusters, it might be really useful and helpful.
Yeah, I remember your reply to her. My thought was, when we are dealing with time series, we are all just passing around this CSV format. But wouldn't it be adequate enough? Is there anything more that you would like to recommend?
Not at this point. So
okay.
I think the advice that I gave you, Byung, stands, but I think we maybe should generalize that advice and get it out to everybody so that everybody at least hears that. And then if people have comments about about that and we have some discussion, we can do that. So I
Mhm.
think we should make that a topic of one of our upcoming data help sessions.
Gotcha. Yeah, appreciate that. Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Byung.
thanks.
Who wants to go next?
I think we can go. I think Claire's on the call too.
Okay.
I believe through her phone. If she can't speak, then I will. I'm just going to show.
Oh, I need to stop share. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just going to show our data field sites as a backdrop to what I'm talking about. Just a map. Can everyone see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so we have a number of different data sets that we are collecting and will be collecting at different points in the project. So what we've been focusing on during this first period are water quality sampling at the sites that you see here. There's streams in Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, and there's another section in Raleigh. We have two types that we've been collecting right now, and I'm not the scientist on this, so if Claire can chime in, I know she was going to try to be here, but I know she's also traveling at the moment. So we have bi-weekly stream sampling that's been going on at these sites, at a few different sites, and then those samples that are collected by the field crew for these different cities get broken up and sent to 3 different labs where they're analyzed across a number of different analytes. And so one of the challenges that we have in terms of a database is we have the electronic versions of this data that also have to track the parent samples that then get split up into the child samples physically that are then shipped to all of these different sites. And so one of the things that I've been doing is creating a SQL. We sat down and hashed out a schematic for a SQL database that tracks both the parent samples and the child samples. Field crew enters those into a Google form that I receive, and then the labs get the physical samples. They get the values for the different analytes, and there's a number of them. One of the labs has, I think, close to 40 different analytes. Another has 17 different analytes. And so I receive that data back from them, and then I have to fuse it back together for our database. So that's basically what's been going on. We also have synoptic data where an individual site is sampled. I think it's 50 different locations along the stream at one point in time instead of bi-weekly like the others, and that also gets fed back into our database. And then the next challenge that we have is we're going to leverage HydroShare and hopefully Jupyter Notebooks. We've talked about this a little bit to start some data visualizations so that our different field sites can have real-time access to all the data across the sites and visualize them. We're going to create customized views that all of the different sites can look at on the fly as the data comes in. Claire, are you able to say anything about the data?
Yeah, I can. My phone is automatically. You can hear me?
A little bit.
Okay, so the phone keeps unmuting and muting me. The other thing we're collecting is sensor data at some of them are 5-minute frequencies, a bunch of different water quality parameters. But I think John basically covered it all. One issue we've had, can you still hear me okay?
Yep.
The one issue we've had on the analytical side, chemical analytical side, our streams are so laced with chloride from road salt that a number of our samples, we have to go back and have them diluted and rerun, either 1 to 10 or 100 dilution, I can't remember. I mean, it occurs year round. And so we haven't been able to make the data sets final. We just have preliminary ones because the dilutions haven't been run yet. That was one analytical issue we ran into. It just slows us down with all these different analytes we're trying to report. And that was one thing. So with the ICP-MS data and the IC data, the dilutions are going to have to be run. So that was one issue. But I think we have this elaborate manifest system because we don't use FedEx and UPS anymore after we had a couple issues last year. So we hand deliver samples through this very highly choreographed method. But I think everything is good. I mean, we've had lots of meetings between John LaGrossa and a core of us There are 4 labs involved. The Carey Institute. Oh, dissolved trace gases is one of the species. There are 5 dissolved trace gases. So those get the stream samples get analyzed for dissolved trace gases at the Carey Institute. ICCMS with Dan Bain, IC with Joel, and then alkalinity and carbon and nitrogen, TOC, TON with Joel. I do water isotopes. So anyway, we have I think we have a pretty good system for John bringing it all back together so that we could, we can slice and dice any way we want to ultimately when we have the final data across sites, across dates, for one analyte or more.
One of the challenges for this was because the sites are distributed and also because the samples are being analyzed across 3 labs, and there's in total, I think close to 70 different analytes. Trying to create a schematic that matches the field samples back to the child. I don't like convoluted database schematics. I like them to be elegant and simple and straightforward and follow all the standard rules. And so that's been quite the challenge, is just communicating between the different labs and trying to come up with something that fits all the different nuances of the different data sets.
John, I mean, there's, I think that EarthChem and CISA can help you there. I mean, EarthChem has for a long time run these synthesis databases that do exactly what you're trying to do in, getting data that was analyzed on a single sample, obviously in subsamples because a sample needs to be split up to go to different labs. And that have been published separately, that are generated in different labs, that with different sets of analytes, that we bring these together into a very coherent data set. And I had actually just a talk with Jeff about discussion to be had with the cluster PIs and the data managers, if there is a need for us to integrate geochemical data in that same way as EarthChem is already doing. So this really raises an immediate flag for me in saying, yes, there is need to integrate data across different labs that were analyzed on the same sample, but then also to integrate data for the same variables analyzed on different samples in different clusters and so on, so that we can actually do a kind of mining of a bigger data set rather than just individual spreadsheets that get uploaded somewhere. So it might be a good idea to have that discussion at one of the next meetings. The other thing I wanted to say is, as you're talking about samples and subsamples, wanted to ask, have you registered these with IGSNs? Because that is something that IGSN tracks, is the relationship between parent and child samples and grandchildren and as far down the hierarchy as you need to go.
That is still open for discussion in our group. We haven't done it yet, but that is certainly something that's on the table.
So let me know if we can help. We can maybe be present in that discussion just to make sure, all the questions that come up in that respect, can potentially be answered directly from somebody from CSAR and
Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, so the registration is not required though. My understanding was our goal was to try to get things to get our data into HydroShare. Isn't that correct?
The sample-based data is not for HydroShare.
Okay, maybe we're talking about something else.
Yeah.
So you mean preserving the samples themselves? Well, physical samples, is that what you mean?
The physical sample, it's the information about the physical samples. So CISA is this registry where you basically describe, when the sample was collected, where it was collected, who collected it, and all that that stuff if there was a specific aspect, as you just said, samples were obviously contaminated with too much salt and so on. That all can be described in the system. And then when you use the IGSN in a data set, you can always link back to the information that is preserved in
Gotcha.
CETA
Yeah.
and see all the
Right.
subsamples that were taken and what happened to them. What
Right.
I've been talking about before with the synthesis of data, that is the EarthChem databases basically store analytical data for physical samples. So, it's anything from rock samples to gas samples that we have from volcanoes and so on. And that could be applied to any other types of samples that you may have. So it's just a matter of, talking with you and seeing if there is an application or some help that we could provide in that respect.
Right, right. So I know too, we will next year, year 3, be collecting soil cores, and those will be analyzed, and that's going to present a different, that'll only be done once, and that'll present a different kind of data set than these, continuous time series. So that's another data set that will have spatial coordinates and analyte results one time across sites. But I think the point you're bringing up is really important. The NSF wants us to be able to compare across sites, across projects,
exactly,
across
yes.
clusters, and that's where we've been just worried so far about getting our own data organized with all these analytes we have. But I think the cross-cluster analysis is something that we should be thinking about for the future if that is desired. If there's a reason to be doing that.
And it could, those type of synthesis data compilations could include older data from, critical zone observatories, and because we have a lot of that data, it just needs to get into this synthesis database rather than sit in individual files. So if, that
right.
actually a longer term perspective, for example, that you have time series that go beyond what was collected now through the network, that may be a consideration. So I had been thinking of, something that we could maybe support a workshop about such synthesis through the synthesis proposals that are being solicited, for the Powell Center.
Sure.
It sounds like
Right.
there's a number of points where maybe we can touch base with you all again. We should probably move on because we're going to run out of time if we don't move on. But thank you for bringing these up. Like, I think there's a number of points here where we could potentially provide some additional assistance with your group and then across groups too. So thanks, John and Claire. We appreciate you being here, and thanks for the update. Okay, who would like to go next?
I can go next.
Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
Okay, I've got a few slides. So this update is for the coastal critical zone. So we set up, and this is more about the data collection. We instrumented 6 locations spread over 3 different states. Each of the locations has 4 sites in a transect. So there's 24 instrumented sites, and each site has multiple different types of sensors. So most of them are long-term continuous monitoring. So a lot of time series records. So the time series is ongoing, and some are shorter event-based collection. Right now we have somewhere around 3 million individual record values, and the bulk of the time series data is all stored in a relational database. Records are indexed along with sensor deployment info, so we can go back to anything that we have a question about, or pull specific sensors. They were all installed last spring, summer 2021, so about 6 to 8 months of data has been collected. And pictures of a table. We're keeping everything stored, or most of it is stored on Google Drive. We're using the Drive app and Colab to just keep things tidy, prevent duplicate data like local copies. We are kind of moving away from Colab because of some issues with interactive plotting. So if anyone has any experience with this or good experience with that, I'd be interested in hearing about that. And so we're sharing just internally and with other collaborators. We've started resource landing pages on HydroShare that will be made discoverable. I believe some are at this point. So just the metadata can be seen if anyone comes across it, they're interested, they can contact the owner. Because it's long-term monitoring and people are still analyzing data as it comes in, likely the data sets won't be published or fully public until further into the project. And so just some of the challenges so far, mostly with collection, field data delays, having to relocate some sites at the moment. So the, process of pulling things out of the ground and reinstalling them somewhere else. And I think just, Jeff, kind of what you were talking about before, data organization and breakdown for some of that time series data, especially something like where we have water quality time series, but then we also have grab samples for the wells. Do we want to put that all together in something or keep that separate, just in terms of publishing and publicly sharing? So that's it.
Great, thank you for that update. I mean, I'm really happy to hear that the rubber is starting to meet the road a bit, and that people are getting to the point where they've got data in hands and they're starting to create resources in HydroShare and think about putting data in there. I think it's time for us to start having some conversations about, if we're collecting time series data, our time series data aren't that different from your time series data. So let's all put time series data in HydroShare in the same way. And this is one of the common themes that I figured was going to come out of this discussion, at least time series. And it sounds like a lot of people are also collecting samples, and that's another way that we can be thinking about standardizing. So yeah, thank you for that, Rachel, appreciate that. And we'll definitely have time series be a subject of an upcoming data workshop. And Kirsten was just talking about some additional things that we can be thinking about with samples and synthesis data sets. Next.
I'll go next if that works.
Okay, great.
I can leap right off on the time series. Most of our data is time series. We have 4 sites dominantly. There's some little satellites, but dominantly 4 sites. And all of them have a legacy of some form or another. And so almost all of them have time series data. The Gordon Gulch, Manitou Springs, and Coal Creek and Seychen in California, / Nevada. Yeah, so working on that. We have, just a standard sets of data, snow depth, soil moisture temperature, ground wells, et cetera, et cetera. We've already got, Gordon Gulch was part of the CZO project. And so that data has been continually coming in, and I've actually got all that data up on HydroShare already. The other stuff is either in negotiation or we've got some on hand. It'll be embargoed a little bit, but we're generally moving forward. So I guess that's about all I got. But
okay. So quick question for you, Eric, and for the rest of you who are putting things in HydroShare already. We put up some interim data sharing guidance on the criticalzone.org webpage with some specific things like make sure you tag your data sets with I think I suggested a keyword of CZNet, and then make sure that you've got all your funding, your project funding information in there. I just wanted to bring that out and make sure people are doing that as they're creating resources in HydroShare.
Yeah, and of course I looked at that when we started going, and we talked about that a little bit, and I have been doing that. And do a little bit more than that. I do not only do the CZNet, I also do, CZNet, DWCZ, and DWCZ, et cetera. Just a bunch of keywords are in there, so it's easy to discover.
Perfect, that's great. And so those sorts of things are what are going to allow us as the hub to go into HydroShare in the interim before the data submission portal is finished. And we're working as hard as we can on the data submission portal to get that going and get it ready so we can have a release here pretty soon. But in the interim, while you are all creating resources in HydroShare, or if you're submitting data to EarthCam, if you're making sure you create those keywords and make sure your funding agency information is in there, that means we'll be able to find those data sets and we'll have kind of a preliminary view of what people are doing. And that'll be really helpful for us, I think, as we start seeing things showing up and appearing. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so if there's nothing else from Eric, I think we've got a couple more to go. So who wants to go next? Let's see, looking down through the list. Sue, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can go pretty briefly. I think that what I would talk about is going to be a little bit more practical as far as like deploying sensor infrastructure and getting team members all together. I actually just gave a little spiel the other day that I'll just touch on super briefly, if that's okay. Let's see if I can find my spiel. Are you more interested in sort of an overall approach, like the kind of things we would talk to actual participants about? Or are you more interested just, these are the data sets we've got, this is what I'm doing?
It's up to you. I mean, the purpose of these sessions is, you know, we'd like to hear what you're doing, what you're working on, any issues that you're having from a data management perspective, but also we want to get the conversations going between all of you because, you know, you all are probably doing really common things, and you know, if you are hitting a roadblock that somebody else has already solved, it'd be great if we could have those discussions here and help each other out. So, you know,
Okay.
Whatever you think would be the most useful for this group.
All right, I'll try to just do this real quick then. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
All righty. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sue Parsons, and I'm the data manager for the Dryland cluster. And basically, as an approach, we put together a website that is really just focused on our like small clusters, like not like the entire like CZNet. This is meant to be like a basically an addendum to the big CZNet website. And on here we have our different research sites, we have all of our people, we have all of our meetings on a Google map and connection info, because we have a bunch of different subgroups. We have like hydrogeophysics, nutrients, carbon, education and outreach. And so we just have a ton of meetings and outreach activities and things like that are just, we don't have a lot on there right now, but we just have upcoming meetings and the connection info to that. We put a field scheduling app on there because we have some remote field sites. And so when grad students go out, we want to know where they're going, when they're going to be there, and if they're not back, if we should worry. And then just some other things like metadata guidelines for students, acknowledgement text, stuff like that, news and events. And then we have some opportunities that are really mirrored on the CZNet opportunities as well. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another thing is that we are trying to do the majority of our collaboration through Microsoft Teams, and I'm warming up to it. One of the strong things about Teams is since we have these different kind of subgroups, we've got a carbon group, they can have all their different specific posts there, and then in their files, they can have pertinent files like their meetings and whatnot. We have hydrogeophysics, nutrients, like I said, and what I did is I set up a data channel, and on this data channel here, there's a descriptive name for different types of data sets. And then when you start digging like into these, there's different, you know, different types, and people can upload all of their data here. And the thing that we're really pushing is the use. So Microsoft Teams uses SharePoint as a backend, and you can use OneDrive to sync just one folder that you have. So instead of having to fill up like your entire local drive with a bunch of unnecessary large data, we're just asking people to basically just take like a working folder, like their working data folder, and link it here. And that way they've automatically backed up and synced all of their working data, and we can see it and be like, hey, if you could write some metadata, blah, 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 that kind of thing. So that's one thing. And then another thing we're doing is we're starting to compile like a comprehensive GIS library. for all of our different sites, we have a Jornada site. That's the Jornada Experimental Range in Las Cruces. We have a site in Kimberly, Idaho. We have the Reynolds Creek Experimental Watershed, which is in southwestern Idaho. And then these aren't terribly descriptive, but we have a couple agricultural sites that are located near El Paso, Texas. And what we're trying to do is, I'm working with the folks over at Jornada. We have this big ArcGIS Online initiative where we're going to try to create these big libraries that have this really nice metadata as just like authoritative data sets for people to download and to bring into interactive web maps and stuff like that. And just sort of superficially started embedding like research site like the Reynolds Creek site or the Jornada site into our like research description pages with links to data sets once they become mature. Let me see if I have anything else really fast to just show you. Oh, so as far as soil samples, we're going all with SASAR. We'd like to get them all published. Right now, we just have like this large soil spreadsheet where we have everybody, and I've kind of like formatted it like a SASAR submission template so that once we go to actually submit them to SASAR, it'll look like they won't have to do much tinkering with that. And because there's a couple of different groups collecting soil samples for different reasons. So we have like the nutrients group collecting it for one reason, and then we have like the carbon group, which I don't know why they have different names, but they do, collecting it for another reason. And so we're just trying to see like who's collecting what, where, and why. Oh, and that brings up another thing. So we have a big data collection matrix. So in that data channel, if we go to the files, because we're still we're in year 2, but we still have like a lot of kind of housekeeping things that we're addressing. We have this like data collection matrix, and this is something that Anthony Darrow-Zainardi started, but basically what it does is it has each variable, where it's being collected, who's collecting it, and then where it's currently archived, start date, end date, frequency, all that good stuff. And we're hoping to have like the GIS and the actual physical data in SharePoint linked in here too. So this is a work in progress, and this will certainly facilitate downstream efforts for data publication and for visualizations and things like that, data discovery visualizations. We got that going on. And then, yeah, we've started working on configuring Shiny apps for all of our tower data. We have a dashboard, and those of you who are good at R, if you ever are feeling generous, we can use a little help. We got the dashboard going, but as far as actually configuring the app goes, I could show you my error page, but no one wants to see that. But yeah, we're working on this. And we're hoping, because we have Flux towers deployed at Reynolds Creek in a couple places, at the Jornada in a couple places. We're soon to have one deployed at our Kimberly site in Kimberly, Idaho. And then I think there's going to be 2 new towers going up at the IV agricultural site and the 5R agricultural site. So we're hoping to have like these cool data dashboards for the various Flux towers. So that's a work in progress, but very close. We're very close. Yeah, and then I basically am having some of the same organizational issues that have been touched on as far as like the data collection matrix. I'm hoping is going to address some of the issues of like how to homogenize, or not like synchronize, what's the word I'm looking for, harmonize these data sets. And we're certainly looking at EarthChem to do that. But yeah, that's my short and sweet.
Okay, thanks, Sue. So it sounds like your group has got a really strong focus on building sort of base data sets and tools that you can all use within the thematic cluster project. Sounds like you've got a nice suite of things going on there. Have you thought much about how you're going to, say, take the next step to kind of define specific products that will be published and archived in formal repositories beyond your project group?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intention is to try to leverage the use of the Borg data publication portal that you're making. I keep joking and calling it the Borg because it'll assimilate everything. But that's the intention, is to really try to push people in that direction, to just use that. There's going to be some things like we have a lot of like geophysics data that's just gigantor that's going to be in Iris, but I think it'll still, we can still have like that metadata record in Quasi. That should be okay. To be honest, I'm waiting for really concrete marching orders. I'm just trying to get everything in a nice, neat pile. And once, you know, that's kind of the initial approach at any rate.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like that matrix that you're talking about might be helpful in sort of narrowing down and thinking about how to chunk things and organize things. You know, ultimately the products that come out of your thematic cluster are really up to you to define. We can help you decide where they should go and how they should be organized and all that kind of stuff. And if you need help in figuring out how to define specific products, given all of the things that you have in your matrix, we can definitely help with that too. So let's hold that thought, and that I think can be another topic of one of our data help sessions, because I think that's one of the hardest parts. We've got all of this data coming in from all of the different directions. How do we put nice packages and bows around things that then we can ship off to HydroShare, or we can ship off to EarthChem, or we can put in Iris, or, you know, how do we make those decisions? Those decisions can be really quite hard to make. And they have implications, because if somebody's writing a paper, they want to be able to cite the data sets that they're using in that paper. And so the granularity with which you're sharing and publishing those things kind of matters a little bit in the end.
Yeah, and that's kind of a question I have too, is I know there's like a real push to show progress, and there's a real push to show like, okay, look at these products that we already have in year 2, like, but I've noticed there's a real reticence on the part, and rightfully so, of many PIs to publish immature, incomplete, under you know, like data sets. And so I think that, yeah, just like some guidance. Like I heard someone else mention about like how they had like a metadata record for data sets that are currently being generated. Maybe like some network level spiels on that, exactly how that would work, might be helpful, just to try to convince people that it's okay to publish, or at least to publish the metadata records, right, before the data set's complete. But,
yeah. Thanks, Sue. Appreciate that update. Sounds like you've got a ton of stuff going on. It's great. I think looking down through the list of people, have I missed anybody who's here? Okay, we had a couple of groups that said they had a conflict and weren't actually able to make it. So are there any questions or discussion that anybody wants to bring up before we finish off our time here today?
Yeah, it's not my question necessarily, but one scientist in the big picture cluster asked this question, which was whether and how the cluster member should represent a cluster when uploading data sets. So we tagged that as CZNet, also in this big CGCN project. But so whether and how to link the submitted data to that cluster, so that if anybody wants to see how each cluster is doing, maybe that's what she had in mind.
Yeah. So Byung, that's a great question. And I'll just say a couple things and then throw the floor open. One is that we want to make sure that you're using keywords that tie it to the larger group. So CZNet.
CZNet, yeah, got that one.
We also want to make sure that in your metadata descriptions, regardless of which repository you end up putting data in, you're putting in the funding information that's related to your thematic cluster, right? So your NSF funding, your NSF award number, your NSF award title, that's going to tell everybody these data were funded by, you know, our thematic cluster award. But I also noticed that Sue in her thematic clusters website had, Sue, I think you had some like metadata guidelines or maybe some attribution guidelines that were there. And I wonder if you want to say a couple words about that.
I can try. Sure, let me pull it up. Basically, this is just coming from just sort of a need. So we have, you know, a set of logos, I guess, available here. There's really two parts to that. So here in Teams, let's go back here. Oops. So as far as like media goes, if there are specific logos that you want people to be using on their PowerPoint presentations, or, you know, basically, or their posters or whatever else, we stuck all those in here, the official ones, because the feds get kind of sensitive about that. And then as far as acknowledgement text goes, because we are working basically with federal partners, that's the, wait, you're not even looking at my screen. I'm trying to show you something.
Okay, I'm still with you, Sue. I'm still with you. It's okay.
Here we go. Sorry. Here, I'll show you what I'm actually talking about here. Okay, so can you see Microsoft Teams?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so in the channel here, or you could just make sort of one of the things that came up is our federal partners have sensitivities about which logos you're using. So we have logos here for all the different participating universities and federal agencies and LTARs and LTARs and all that. That segued into a conversation about acknowledgement text. So we put all of our acknowledgement text on here, and we're trying to have links to different collaborating agencies too. I don't think these are up right now. They look like they're a little bit messed up. I'm gonna have to go and edit that. Just so that the different groups have some ownership, you know. It's the Dryland CZ is out of the University of Texas, El Paso, but it's also the USDA ARS. It's BSU, Boise State University. It's University of New Mexico. It's the Jornada Experimental Range. I mean, there's a bunch of different ones. There's also, we work with Texas A&M, like there's some private partners, the Ivy Farm, Agricultural Pecan Farm. So we want to just make sure everybody's got, oh yeah, Kimberly. And what was the other thing you asked about, Jeff?
Well, so the point that I'm trying to make here was that I saw some of this material in what you were showing, and I think to get back to Byung's question here, at the very, very minimum, we want to make sure that you're using keywords and funding agency information that pull you back to your NSF funding and that link you with the rest of CZNet. How you present yourself to the public world is somewhat of a policy decision for you to make as a thematic cluster. And as Sue is saying, that could be in acknowledgement slides on PowerPoint presentations. It could be the acknowledgement sections of the papers that are being published as part of your thematic cluster. I mean, there's lots of different places where this potentially comes into play, and not just the data sets that you're sharing formally in different repositories. So yeah, I would recommend thinking about that at the level of the cluster. What sort of standard acknowledgements or standardized text that you want people to be adding to the products that you're producing and formally sharing, including presentations, posters, publications, data sets, all of those things that are coming out of your cluster as a product. Byung, does that answer your question? Hopefully.
Yeah, I appreciate that answers. So I sort of was aware of it. I think if I may translate our question, this is my understanding. How can we make the data set submitted by someone that belongs to a cluster X searchable by the cluster name?
Okay.
How can we link the data set to a cluster so that it can be searched?
Within
Through the
hybrid tier or
through the
generally?
cluster name. What are the data sets submitted by people that are in cluster X?
Do you mean just within, I guess, within what search like interface?
So I think she was somehow sort of anticipating that when submitting data, she will have to enter the cluster name so that her data set is linked to the cluster. So if somebody wants to search for all the data sets submitted by people in a cluster, that person can give the cluster name and then HydroShare will return. Yeah, these are the data
Yeah.
sets submitted.
I think that keywords would be an important part of this. Is just Young. I know you emailed me somewhat about a tangentially related topic the other day, but I think that in the HydroShare Discover page, it would be keywords, and also ultimately like all of the resources related to that cluster should be aggregated in, or compiled in the thematic cluster group. And so if you wanted to just direct them directly to the group, all of them would be available there if they've all been shared to the group level by the contributor. So,
Oh, okay. So your answer will make it work. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
so
remember
hopefully.
you replied to.
Mhm.
Young, one
Okay,
other thing
sharing,
that we
show
have
sharing.
not talked about much yet is that we as the hub will be providing additional data discovery capabilities as part of our project. And we will be keying off of keywords. We will be keying off the metadata that you submit to the repositories, and we will be keying off the funding agency information. And we can tie specific data sets to specific clusters through funding agency information. What Clara said about affiliating your data sets with a group in HydroShare is great, but groups only exist in HydroShare, right? So if you're submitting data sets to another repository, we will be providing search functionality that will work across the different repositories. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah,
But
so
we
I was
won't
under the impression
ever
you were
get
asking
there.
about HydroShare. Pardon?
Yeah, we won't ever get there unless you make sure to tag your data sets with the right keywords and the right funding agency information. Otherwise, we're going to have a hard time cataloging them.
Okay, the text search seems to be text search,
I
keyword-based text search. Okay, I get it. Yeah.
I have a quick question. So I work also for another project, a big EPSCoR grant, and they have a lot of the same data management issues that we're discussing here. And they have a data submission portal that they're working to. I would say that it's probably not as sophisticated. It's like a Drupal system. But they generated a bunch of keywords, like a big list. It was a vetted list of keywords by all of the different research groups affiliated with the project at the different universities. And there's basically the different research disciplines. And I wonder, even just a hierarchical list of defined keywords.
Like a controlled vocabulary?
Like a controlled vocabulary, but my understanding of controlled vocabulary is it's you're calling different variables very specific things. I guess I was thinking zooming out a little bit, and we're thinking keywords, right? So broader, maybe just a little bit broader, not keying down to very specific variables written a particular way. But yeah, maybe that is the right word. I don't know.
It's more of it is a control vocabulary, but it's more of a taxonomy because you have multiple levels. Is this the Idaho group, Sue?
Yes, University of Idaho up in Moscow. Yeah, so that would actually be super duper helpful from my perspective as far as thinking, because I'm not a science, I'm a scientist by training somewhat, but at a certain point I diverged and became more on the data management GIS end. So it's often hard for me to get really good descriptive keywords, whereas if you just had those available from a drop down, that's an easy chat for someone hey, are you more this or more that? And then that way it's really discoverable and meaningful, maybe to somebody who's actually looking for data to analyze their data with. I don't know.
Yeah, so this is a great point and something that we can definitely work on and something that we can build into the data submission portal. We've talked about control vocabularies. We've talked about where we might be able to incorporate them with the data submission portal. I don't think we're going to want to really rigidly require that you pick from this list of terms, but what we could do is build into the data submission portal the ability to see a list of terms and choose from those terms if you want to use them. And that way we can make releases of the data submission portal without it and then add it as it becomes available, because there's lots of questions surrounding, well, what's the list that we should be using? And we'd love to have that conversation with you. So I'll put that on the list of things that we need to talk more about.
I actually have to sign off, but thank you, everybody. It was
Okay.
super cool to get a chance to chat. Cheers.
Great. Yeah. Thanks everybody for taking the time to tell us about what you're up to. And yeah, we're out of time. So thanks for being here today. And we will see you online next week for our next workshop, which is, I can't remember what is next. Is it Caesar, Kirsten? It's either Caesar or EarthChem.
It's EarthChem first.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
thank
I
you as
didn't
always.
realize I was
Thank
still muted. I kept saying, EarthChem,
you.
EarthChem.
why doesn't he hear me?
All right. See you next week, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.